Hi, love. So this is our introductions mini lesson for research. And so now that we have written our body paragraphs and we have a very clear idea of how it all developed from our thesis statement, one approach is to write the introduction after you write the body paragraphs. And what this ensures is that you don't write an introduction that doesn't quite match where your essay goes or your research paper goes. Because sometimes as we write, we find new sources and our ideas kind of shift and morph, and so sometimes what we end up writing doesn't quite fit with our introduction. So one practice is to write the introduction after the body paragraphs, and that's what we're going to practice. So let's take a look at what an introduction does. You know that this is your first experience to show really the reader who you are, set the tone for your essay. And in this context, our argument is not a personal tone. It is a very matter-of-fact tone. It has a little bit of persuasion to it, but it's not as rhetorically persuasive as maybe some of the speeches that we've studied and things like that. But we're just really trying to show our argument with an academic, formal kind of look. So it's really important to first alert the reader's attention and interest. So unlike a narrative, we're not going to grab their attention with onomatopoeia, and we're not going to ask a rhetorical question, but rather we're going to approach it a little bit different, but you still need to be able to pique their interest. It's also going to indicate a scope and direction for your paper and act as a kind of navigational guide to its reading. Basically, I think about this, especially around that idea of navigation, as a roadmap to the rest of your paper. You don't, well, many people don't go on vacation or go to a destination without typing in something to their GPS or their phone, or they're looking at a map. They want to know where they're going before they get there, and that's really what an introduction does. It allows your reader to know where they're going before they get there. It also shows the reader how you are interpreting or approaching the topic. So rather than just saying, this paper is about X, Y, or Z, you're also giving them an idea of kind of what you're going to say about that topic, where you stand within that topic. So in our case of taking a stand and making a change, they're going to know what kind of stand or change you're going for. It also provides a context for the main issue. So again, by the end of their introduction, they should really know where you're going. It indicates the focus of the paper, and also it almost indicates and foreshadows your conclusion and point of view. You're not giving too much away, you're not giving too much context, you're not drawing all of your conclusions, but they should sort of know where you're going before you even begin. And that's kind of a tool to make them comfortable and also just give them a nice preview. So how do you get there? First, you have to start the audience thinking, bridge into your topic, provide some relevant, brief contextual information, preview your main arguments, and introduce your thesis. So let's break those down a little bit. To get your audience thinking, you want to draw them in from the first sentence. And some common ways are an anecdote, sometimes a real or hypothetical anecdote. For example, if you're doing a paper on sports and you want to use a real Mark McGuire story, you could start out with a Mark McGuire story to grasp their attention. Or you could do a hypothetical anecdote by starting with the word imagine, which we'll see in just one second. You can use a statistic, a startling or awe-inspiring statistic, but something to note about statistics is you can't just plop it in there, call it a day, and start your paper. You need to really incorporate why that statistic is important, and we'll take a look at an example of that as well. You can also do a general statement. Many people start with this idea, but we have to be careful to stay away from what I call the dawn of man introduction. When you say something like, since the beginning of time, people have been arguing. Okay, so you don't want to start so broad. You want to, if you're going to go general, you still have to go general within the context of your topic, which you'll see in a second with Ima's example. And then also you can use a quotation. And again, it must be relevant. You can't just, if your paper is about courage, you're not just going to type in a courage quote from brainyquotes.com and plop it in there. It needs to be really, really integrated into your paper, or at least into your introduction and conclusion, and have something to do with the context of your paper. So if you're writing a paper on childhood obesity, you're not going to use a Bob Dylan quote. Those things don't really connect, okay? So let's take a look at how Ima has approached her 4 options. Her first option is an anecdote that she used as an imagine. So she writes, imagine a classroom in lines of desks, students bending over bubble sheets, careful not to let their pencil marks stray from the confines of the tiny circles. Hunched over shoulders tight, they find it difficult to concentrate knowing their test will determine their fate. Now, imagine a classroom where the students gather in groups around the room, their task to use their knowledge from the week to solve the problem of a schedule change at a high school. Using the needs of the school and the school's mission, statement, teamwork, math skills, philosophy, and research, they create viable options for the school that the school can consider for the upcoming school year. So what she's done here is create these 2 dual scenarios to show one side of her argument and the next side. So before even reading the thesis statement or any of the paper, the audience, the reader, can really kind of guess where she's going with this because she focuses more on the second part. So they already have a pretty clear idea of where she's going simply by this imaginary anecdote. Another thing she can use is a statistic, and she found this one that she might be able to use. 85% of employers concerned with hiring creative people say they cannot find the applicants they seek, according to a 2007 survey, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so she picked a startling percentage. 85% are concerned that they can't find creative people. That plays right into her paper about over focus on testing, taking out creative and innovative teaching, and therefore affecting the students in a negative way. So by starting out that kind of startling statistic, that piques the reader's interest, and she can kind of take then her own view on imagination in the classroom. Here's a general statement that she could start with. Over the past 20 years, American education has shifted to adhere to new policies intended to address the changing needs of the 21st century student. So, very general, but notice it's not, since the beginning of time, education has changed. Instead, she just jumps right in, she gives it a nice context and focuses in. Or she could use a relevant quotation. Robert Frost is someone that would be taught in a classroom, and so that's relevant. It's not just a random person, it is a poet, and his quote is, "Freedom lies in being bold." So Ima, after considering all 4 of these viable options, chose to do this quotation, "Freedom lies in being bold." Let's take a look at the next step. Now she has to bridge into her topic. Now that she just talked about freedom in that quote, and Robert Frost, she's going to contextualize that and bridge it into what she's actually talking about, which is imagination in the classroom. So if she started out with this quote, "Freedom lies in being bold," then she says, "Frost, an American with vision, understood the need to be bold to make change. In particular, he made change in poetry with using his imagination, but his words go beyond just his work." So now she's kind of bridging into the imagination piece. And for you, it will be very specific to what your topic is. But this bridge is super important to take the audience from your very maybe broad hook into the topic of your paper. Then you have to provide brief context or background. It has to be relevant to orient your reader to your issue. So she goes from talking about, but his words about imagination and being bold to be free go beyond his work. She said, "Today more than ever, American educators' decisions are being driven by standards-based education. In many cases, the creative freedom they once had in the classroom is diminishing." So now she's providing this context of, oh, people have to be bold to make change, and it looks like people now need to be bold to make change in the realm of these American educators. So she's slowly making it more and more specific for her reader. Then she needs to preview her main arguments. So after she's done the bridge and provided a little bit of contextual information, she's going to basically show what her subtopics are. Now this can be a list of subtopics, which many of us have learned how to do, but trying to generalize these subtopics to be a little less listy can be very effective. So take a look at her example. In the face of the must-dos and the have-tos, teachers are having a difficult time incorporating the imagination that students need to make bold change in a global world. What those teachers need to realize is they do have the capacity to reincorporate creativity in the classroom and maintain with integrity the integrity of education in America. So she doesn't say that because of the global students, the teachers' creativity, and the blank, she actually makes them into some pretty sophisticated statements. Now, you can go the list way or you can go Ima's way, but I'm just giving you options. Then finally, the last thing, usually, the thesis can be found as the first sentence, but for the purposes of our school, we often focus it in on the last sentence or one of the last sentences right before the end of the introductory paragraph. So the thesis statement, we know, is one sentence that explicitly states the focus and direction of writing. As you guys get longer and longer papers, if the assignment is very long or complex, sometimes your thesis statements will be more than just one sentence. But for our short kind of 5-page paper, it's just going to be one sentence. So let's take a look at IMAs. Although the current trend of education promotes standards-based learning, teachers must not forget the importance of imagination in the classroom. So you have seen this thesis a lot. We've already gone through and we've been working through this. Now, some of you might have to adjust the way your thesis reads once you write your introduction, and that's totally okay. Once you start a thesis doesn't mean that's going to be the last thing that goes, the only thing that will go into your paper. You can adjust and morph and change what your thesis looks like and sounds like to fit in with your introduction paragraph. So let's look at Ima's final piece here, and from beginning to end, and just read how it, and think back to what an introduction is supposed to do. Freedom lies in being bold. Robert Frost. Robert Frost, an American with vision, understood the need to be bold to make change. In particular, he made change in poetry using his imagination. But his words go beyond just his work. Today, more than ever, American educators' decisions are being driven by standards-based education, and in many cases, the creative freedom they once had in the classroom is diminishing. In the face of the must-dos and have-tos, teachers are having a difficult time incorporating the imagination that students need to make bold change in a global world. What those teachers need to realize is they do have the capacity to reincorporate creativity in the classroom and maintain the integrity of education in America. Although the current trend of 21st education promotes standard-based learning, teachers must continue to focus on the importance of imagination in the classroom. So there's Ima's introduction. Always think back, how am I going to go from general to specific? How am I going to lead my readers into where I'm going without giving them too much information? And it's just think about really what kind of impression do you want to leave your reader after the first couple of sentences. And that's essentially what an introduction is. So good luck. Try a couple of different introduction techniques out like Ima did with her openings and see which one you like better.